Hello, and welcome to another Fantasy Premier League video. My name is Steve, and I've battled from the depths of 4.2 million back in game week 11, climbing Everest all the way up to just outside the top 700k, which is still an abysmal rank, but it's a long way back from where I was in the early stages of the season. Now, there's only 3 weeks left, and my target of 200k is looking pretty slim, as that's now 80 points away from my current rank. So the free hit 34 teams just did too much damage compared to my wildcard in the blank. Well, it looks that way at this point anyway. But I've got quite a differential team given I did wildcard in the blank last week. So there is still a chance. And I'm deploying the bench boost this week as well. But of course, it's going to need to be big, and there aren't any double game weeks left in the season. We were already pretty aware of that last week, but it has now been confirmed. And so when I did build my wild card a couple of weeks ago, I did have players in that would have been doubling this week, and now don't have as kind of fixtures without the double as potentially what they could have been. So this week, I'm bringing in an under the radar 0.9% owned player, selling a popular asset that is owned by 25% of the game to try and find some big differential points. And I'm also eyeing up KDB as well. So in the game week summary, we'll just go through game week 35, in which I scored 53 points, boosting me up another 70k rank towards my goal. It was actually a lot more than that before the final game of the game week, in which I did have Wood coming up against a whole bunch of Crystal Palace assets. Wood didn't actually pull in any points, which was annoying. Now, last week I was saying, well, I was tossing up between Mbeumo and Isak, saying it was super close between the two of them for the captaincy last week. Now, Isak came out on top as one of the top scoring players for the week on just 9 points. It was actually a bunch of differentials who all came away with the double digits. So Schade came away with 15 points, not owned by much. Garnacho with 12 points. Tielemans came away with 11 points, and I had Rodgers sitting in the team, which is a little bit annoying. KDB came away with 11 points as well. He's still pretty lowly owned. I think he's down at around 10 or 11% at the moment. Enzo Fernandez on 10 points is maybe not so much of a differential. He came away with 10 points. It is still a differential, but not as big of a differential as the rest of the names in this list. McNeil on 10 and Odobia on 10 points. The only other notable player was Palmer, who came in with a 10-pointer from a 96th minute penalty and actually looked pretty slick in that fixture as well. I captained Mbeumo for his assist, came through with 10 points. Vice captaincy stayed on Isak for a 9-pointer. So what was that? There's like 4 points extra in that had I gone the other way with the captaincy. Now on the wild card, I was tossing up between Cunha and Wissa. Now Cunha had the best immediate fixture, which I was quite worried about in game week 34, but Wissa had the better fixtures for the rest of the season. Whoever I was bringing into that spot was going to have to last in the team until game week 38. Wissa got smashed by Cunha in that first week. Cunha did manage to stay quiet against City in game week 35, but he looked super dangerous. I think he ran through about 4 men of Man City's midfield at one point. He also got a shot off with like 3 City players within 1 meter vicinity of him, standing still on the edge of the area, and hit the post. If he does go to United next year, I am going to be super happy because he actually looks like a goal scorer, which, I mean, United have actually been scoring a few goals recently, but the whole season's been pretty woeful in front of goal. So Cunha next year to United would be great, but I'd like him to stay quiet for the rest of the season if at all possible. Now, Wissa did pull some points back against Cunha this week. 14 points for Wissa across the 2 weeks that I have owned him. A blank for Cunha in game week 35, but he is still 3 points ahead across those 2 fixtures. Now, Wissa takes on Ipswich away, whereas Cunha has Brighton at home. Now, I would prefer to have Wissa for this fixture, but Cunha could still do some damage in that Brighton fixture. So fingers crossed that he does stay quiet. Now, I'm a little bit differential with the double up of Gvardiol and Ruben Dias in the back line, and actually both of them came away with bonus points this week. Gvardiol with a goal line clearance, I think it was Aït-Nouri's shot, earned himself 2 bonus points. Ruben Dias didn't actually really do a lot in the match, apart from hitting one really good long-range shot. Well, it was struck well, but it was off target, but didn't really do a hell of a lot else in the match. He came away with 1 solo bonus point and was only owned by 4.1% of the competition, so some nice differential points there. I'll just touch on Aït-Nouri quickly because he is in my team currently sitting on the bench, and he will be being played this game week, as I will be using all 15 men in my bench boost. Now, he hit the post. It was a series of shots. I think he even might have had 2 shots in that sequence, but he ended up hitting the post. He also beat the keeper and had that shot cleared off the line by Gvardiol. Both were very good technical shots, just ever so slightly wayward. Now, he was on my bench, but will be in the starting lineup this week against Brighton at home, hoping that he can come away with a clean sheet and some sort of attacking returns. Now, the only other key point, I suppose, for how game week, well, there's 2 key points on how game week 35 went. KDB started last week and scored the solo goal to receive max bonus points of 11 points in game week 35. And I am super gutted about this because I was actually discussing bringing in KDB with Clyde Bickford in the comments on the video last week. And I had set an alarm to wake myself up at 5 a.m. New Zealand time just before the deadline to see if there was going to be a team leak about whether or not KDB was starting. Now, I didn't wake up. I missed that alarm at 5 a.m. I was absolutely shattered. And so I didn't make the transfer. And I had already penciled in Murphy to be sold this game week in game week 36, as he's got a tricky fixture against Chelsea. But the thing that was holding me back from not bringing KDB in was I was actually holding out to see if Haaland was going to be getting some minutes off the bench, because if he did get some minutes off the bench, I did have the money in the bank, which I had saved on the wild card, in order to have the funds to go straight from Isak all the way up to Haaland, and hopefully use Haaland as like a big differential for the final 3 game weeks of the season. And he was on the bench, just stayed on the bench for the entire fixture. The holding out for Haaland here has actually cost me 10 points, because Murphy got himself pulled off in the 55th minute to come away with a 1-pointer and didn't really do anything in the game week. The only other point of note is Dean Huijsen on my bench scored a header goal from a long throw. The 2-meter tall Huijsen, which is the reason why I do have him in my team. He looks like the target man, especially for those long throws. On my bench with 8 points. Everywhere else was pretty much self-explanatory. So, game week 36. Murphy has to go. He was already penciled in. He's now been pulled off before the 60-minute mark. I do have 2 free transfers in the bank. So I did bank a transfer last week. Haaland has yet to play any minutes, so he is not in contention for my team for the whole rest of the season. He's probably only going to get minutes off the bench this week. He might even only get minutes off the bench the following week. Who knows? It's going to be hard to tell with Haaland. And I can't invest that much money into someone who's just, well, probably not even going to start. So it is now time to dish out the 6.9 million I have sitting in the bank in reserve to replace Murphy. So this is how the team is looking for game week 36 without any transfers. Now, Bournemouth were meant to be doubling this week, so I had tripled up on Bournemouth. They don't have a double. Aston Villa was also potentially doubling this week, so were the Man City assets. They still have a good game away to Southampton, but it's not looking as strong as what it was with all those doubling assets in the team. Now, there are some fixtures to attack in game week 36, and I'd like to be strengthening the bench boost as much as possible, because most of the time we are deploying bench boosts in a double game week. This will be a single game week bench boost, and having Murphy on the bench at the moment against Chelsea at home and Livramento on the bench against Chelsea at home doesn't look like the strongest bench boost, especially with my other two assets being Bournemouth. They are at home, but it is a tricky fixture at home to Aston Villa. Now, I am happy to take some risks to gain some ranks across the last 3 game weeks, which is why I am eyeing up this super differential. Now, just to talk through some of the moves that I had penciled in, which I am moving away from. I am now holding Isak for the rest of the season. The only player I was going to sell him for was going to be Haaland. That's off the cards, and so Isak will be staying in the team. Plus, he also played the full 90 minutes last week as Howe chased the win. He brought Wilson on in the final stages of the match, playing next to Isak, as he did try to hunt down those 3 points. And so I'm more than happy to play Isak at home to Chelsea this week. And he has a massive ownership. So up like 61.5%, almost 62% owned in the game. Now, the two players that I did have penciled in for transfers out were Jacob Murphy and Livramento. Livramento at home to Chelsea. I mean, I don't expect a clean sheet there, but he does always have some attacking threat, as Livramento is always pretty far up the pitch. Now, I did have plans to sell Livramento, but I am now eyeing up a differential transfer instead. And with that attacking threat and that he is playing at home, I don't see the need to actually sell Livramento this week. Now, if I was going to sell Livramento, it was going to be to Nico Williams, who has Leicester at home and then West Ham away in the next 2 fixtures. And I think Leicester is just a banker fixture to be targeting in game week 36. But I will talk through why I am pivoting away from this move. So the first thing will be that I will be selling Jacob Murphy. So we'll probably put Rodgers on the bench as to how the team will shape up. Now, this is pretty obvious. It's going to be going to KDB. I'm almost certain that he's going to start this week. He's got Southampton away this week, and then he's got a full week's break before they have to play the FA Cup final round. So I don't see any risk of him being benched or coming off too early. I mean, if KDB starts and plays 70 plus minutes, he could do serious damage against Southampton, the worst team in the league. Plus, KDB has started the last 5 Premier League games in a row, playing a minimum of 83 minutes per game. So I think he's definitely going to get over the 70. Well, he's got a really good shot of getting over the 70-minute mark this week. Plus, I do have one open slot for a Man City asset and the funds sitting in the bank. So Jacob Murphy getting pulled off before the 60 to go straight the way up to KDB. I think that's a pretty no-brainer transfer. And so Jacob Murphy will be going for KDB this week. And so the differential asset that I am looking to bring in is Kevin Schade from Brentford. Now, he scored a brace last week against United and scored a goal in the previous game week against Forest. Now, Forest have been a pretty resolute defence all season long. And for the final 3 fixtures of the season for Brentford, they have Ipswich this week. It is an away fixture. Then they have a home fixture next week against Fulham. I think they will probably do quite well in that match. And then the final game of the season is against Wolves, but it is an away fixture. But I think Wolves is also a team worth targeting. Now, Kevin Schade is only owned by 0.9% of the game, and he actually spent a big portion of the first 22 weeks of the season on the bench, as he had 11 appearances off the bench, only getting between 10 to 20 minutes across those 11 games in the first 22 games of the season. Now, with that limited number of minutes, Schade is on 10 goals and 5 assists in that period. And he has started the last 13 consecutive Premier League games. So I don't think he's at any risk. I mean, he's at minimal risk of not starting this match. 10 goals and 5 assists with 11 appearances off the bench is pretty decent going. And they are away to Ipswich, which is a team well worth targeting. And I wouldn't mind playing him in the final 2 game weeks of the season either. So, in order to get Schade into the team, I'm actually looking to sell Morgan Rogers. Now, Morgan Rogers has been in my team for pretty much all the season, I think. I think I've had him almost the whole season. Now, he put up 0.8 XGI last week against Fulham, but I watched that match and he didn't actually have a great game. He was giving the ball away all too easily in the fixture. I can't even remember him getting like super unlucky, so I don't know exactly how that 0.8 XGI was made up. Aston Villa also looked pretty leggy in that match, and Bournemouth away is going to be quite a tricky fixture for Aston Villa. So I'm looking to go against the 25% ownership or game ownership to buy Schade as a super differential at 0.9% ownership, who is in form, is in a team that still seems to be going for the goals, and has a feel for goals himself, scoring 3 goals in the last 2 fixtures. And midfielders obviously have a much bigger upside than defenders, and so I'm looking to invest my second free transfer in Rogers to Schade, as opposed to going and selling Livramento to go and buy someone like Nico Williams against against Leicester City. Now, I could still potentially sell Livramento for a hit. However, this defenders out for a hit is typical. I would typically only do that if it's much earlier in the season. I'm just going to hold that player for like a really long period of time. Now, if Williams gets a clean sheet this week against Leicester, which odds on they probably will, and Livramento blanks, then it actually works out as identical points. So there's actually no point in making that transfer. I mean, who knows? Maybe Nico Williams comes away with a bonus point and you go slightly up there, but it would have to be Nico Williams clean sheet and Livramento blanks, no clean sheet, no bonus, no assists. Now, I'm actually not using the Livramento spot next week either. He's actually going to be on my bench for game week 37. So it is really only a 1 week punt. Like Nico Williams would have to beat Livramento plus the -4 points in a 1 week roll of the dice. And I think that's just too thin. So I'm going to be holding on to Livramento. Hope for some attacking returns against Chelsea or a potentially pretty rare clean sheet. And I might even be using Livramento on the final day of the season at home against Everton as well. So there is a little bit of reason to hold on to him too. So the 2 transfers are going to be Murphy out for KDB and Rogers out for Kevin Schade as a maximum roll of the dice to see if I can claw my way back up closer to my 200k target. And so that only leaves the decision of captaincy. Now for me, it's either going to be Mbeumo or KDB for captaincy this week. Now Mbeumo is away from home, more likely to play the full 90 minutes and has penalties in his locker. Now, not many managers are going to be able to get to KDB very easily this week. It would probably either involve a hit or selling someone like Mo Salah, who I don't think many managers are going to let go of. So owning KDB at an 11% ownership level will already be a pretty big differential. So the question comes down to, do I want to double down on KDB for the captaincy and go against Mbeumo? Now, Mbeumo is 44% owned by the game and will be a heavy captaincy favourite this week. Probably not as devastating as what it might have been earlier in the season, as I'm sure there will be a lot of managers going for differential captains as they try to gain as much rank as they can before the end of the season commences. But knowing my luck this season, especially early season with some of these big decisions, if I go against Mbeumo this week, it will probably be the week that he ends up going and scoring a brace, and that would single-handedly ruin Gameweek 36 and potentially most of the bench boost if he did in fact do that. So I'm actually going to use an 11% owned KDB, a 0.9% Schade as my key differentials, sitting alongside Diaz, who's only 4.4% owned, as well as playing my bench boost this week, which not many managers have left either. And I think all of that combined is a pretty massive differential all by itself. And so I'm actually going to stick with the safety pick of Mbeumo for captain this week so that he doesn't single-handedly undo all of those differentials that I do have sitting in the squad. Compounding my misery if that happened for game week 37. But all right, well, that wraps up this video. So don't forget to like and subscribe and leave us a comment to tell us what you think. Good luck for the game week, everyone. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you all again next time.